Hi, and welcome to the Thriving Entrepreneurs 15 Minutes. She is Rochelle Moulton, entrepreneur coach and partner at Growth Tribute.
He is David Foss. Welcome.
So, today we want to talk about how does an entrepreneur delegate successfully? And we'll let Rochelle start this off.
Well, where to start, first of all? It's such a big topic once again, but I would like to start it with, I would say, a quote. Here, as a business owner, won't get you there. So everything you've been doing up to this point to get will not get you further ahead. And I think that goes very well with delegating. You have to start delegating at the point of changing from startup.
Yes. And I would go even further, and I would say that all business growth depends on efficiently and successfully delegating in a coordinated manner, because if the delegation isn't coordinated and it's not efficient and it doesn't actually work, how is your business going to grow?
Yeah. So it requires a lot before you even hire people, before you go after what to delegate, understanding how everything changes within the business operations, including your own role, as you say, how to delegate, how to go about it. And it takes, right?
Yeah. So I think one way to look at delegation when you start to do it, or when you're in the middle of doing it, you have a combination of practical and personal reasons. There's the practicality of the economics. Maybe I can earn more money while I pay somebody to do something that I used to do. There's execution reasons. This person knows more than I do and can do it more successfully. And there's personal reasons, like how I don't like doing this, or I really actually do like doing this and I want to hold on to it. But there's also a load reason. I'm doing too much and I'm not living very well. And I think there's a couple of questions that come from that. One is to look at the practical reasons. What are the practical reasons why I would make this decision? And the personal reasons are like, how do I feel about letting go? What does that mean to me? What impact does it have on me?
Yeah, it has both sides. And I would like to add to that own ability to trust and your own ability to let go, and also see yourself in a new way. You've been doing everything and wearing all the hats up until this point, that position. And I think with that also goes very much the idea of business and staying important to the business. So delegating does not mean that you're stepping back in order to be at the forefront again and to bring this business. But if we don't change that mindset, then we slip, even though we are delegating.
Yeah. Those are very good points. And we're getting messages from people that say that they can't hear you. You're a little choppy to me, but I can still hear you. So we're going to keep going. And for those people who can't hear her, I promise you what she's saying is brilliant.
Something is off.
Following on what you said, we can't talk about delegation without talking about ownership. And so really what we're doing in delegation is, you as the founder or the entrepreneur own a certain task or a process. And if you started the business, well, you owned all of them. And then you're giving that ownership to somebody else. And so one of the questions that you can ask when you go through that process of delegating is, do I still actually own part of this? Or does that person that I delegated to really have ownership, can fail, can succeed, can change what they're doing and still reach the goal? And those are really difficult questions sometimes, because it requires like a brutal sense of self-honesty.
Yeah. And I think that's a very good point indeed, that action here is mandatory. Self-inquiry is mandatory. this is well taken care of, you have to make sure that indeed, whenever you get feedback, you can head to the leader role and look at this from a different angle than just being that business owner.
Yes, because that is actually, I'm not trying to plug myself, but that is actually the crux of my work, that starting a business and running or leading a business are two very, very different things. They're obviously related,
Sure.
but this transition that you're talking about, you need to go through that transition. You need to be able to manage and lead and inspire and coach and help and support and serve the people who are going to be doing the things that the business requires. That, well, when it was you in the spare bedroom on a cardboard desk, you used to do everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then it requires you to change your complete position and your business. But too many entrepreneurs get stuck in this process, not because of the mechanisms, not on, but rather the role they have to change. And then my question to you would be like the internal state of the entrepreneur that's holding him or her back from successfully delegating without feeling too much involved, without this is not well taken care of.
Yeah, it's a different kind of ownership, right? So when you start a business and you own and execute all the tasks, there really is no confusion about it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you run a business and you have a lot of people who are executing the tasks that you can remember doing something like, or that need to be done, you're really in almost like a parenting or a coaching position where you say, how's it going? What do you need? Can I ask you a few questions about this that might help you get further down the road? Do you have any ideas that I don't have or that might help the rest of the team? And it's really not a loss as much as it is a change. And so I think that when people feel like I should be doing that, or that's not the way I would do it, or I want that done differently, they really have to sort of like look inwards and say, how am I doing with the change?
Yeah.
Yes, there might be a period or a feeling of losing, like I don't get to create the logo anymore. Now I just have to look at versions of it, but I still can add to it. And my role is actually really important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in the end, you do want to be a servant leader. You do want to make sure that you whatever it needs. But it goes up until the point where you actually get to doing so. I mean, using that time to be a servant leader, but also a role. Because in the end, if you're just leading a team and you're just being there to get away from bottom, and you're no longer that entrepreneur. You're just working on getting that work done from a leader's perspective. It is a phase of where you start to integrate how to be that leader and how to provide them with whatever, enabling them to know what the vision is and to enable them to have that ownership to take you there. Because otherwise, you'll never move to the phase of being in that strategy role and
Yes, agreed. And so I want to point out, we've got 6 minutes left. We have a couple of questions. Karen's got one about trust. Where do we find a trustworthy person? And not that we are giving out fortune cookie wisdom, but how to think about things. And, Karen, one thing we can say is what makes you a trustworthy person? In part, it is that people trust you. In part, it is that you were taught or somebody modeled the idea of trustworthiness. So when you find somebody that has the ability to join you and potential, in some ways you have to create that trust, right? If you or somebody in your position says, great, you've made a good impression on the new client, make sure you CC me on every single email that you send. Why? Because I don't trust you. But if you give that person trust, that allows that trust to grow, so to speak. We have another question here from Jihane. What can someone in the startup phase set themselves up for success, transition to ownership rather than the main operator? That is sort of the crux of the problem.
Yep.
And I think one way to approach that, Jahane, is even though you know how to do something, write it down so that when you go to hire somebody, you can say, look, this is how I did it. Please make it better. Please make it fit you. Please make it fit the other jobs that we're hiring for. And so when you are the main operator, ask yourself or think of yourself as somebody who works for the business and not as the person who owns it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would give him the same exact answer. While ready, start writing down exactly what you're doing so that you can enable somebody else to do that quicker. I would highly recommend the book E-Myth, not giving fortune cooking wisdom, but this is really essential part of how to do this before it's needed. To not being like overdelegate everything at a moment that you're too busy to do so. While you're actually operating, you hone it down, and that is when indeed you can give it to somebody else and ask them to improve that. I think it's just being smart about foresight and preparing.
Yeah, and as we talk about a lot, oftentimes the questions are a lot more important than, well, the answers aren't unimportant, but if you have the wrong question, no matter how well you answer it, you're going to get something that's not going to be very helpful. Yeah. So when you're delegating, and this can be the first person that you hire, or it can be the 100th person you hire, you really want to ask yourself, how would this work with more people involved? How would I split this up? What makes sense, right? And if you have a small company that's 20, 30, 40 people in it, those people should also be asking the exact same question. And you can help the people that you work with by going to, say you have a small marketing team of 3 people, a small, technical engineer team of 5 people. You go to them and sit down and say, what would it look like if there were 10 people here? What could you do? Right? Yeah. That's a really great question to always have bubble up on a regular basis in your mind. We have 2 minutes left because we promised 15 minutes and we stick to our promises. Sure. What else have you got?
Thing about that. So in order to be having that foresight, in order to be prepared for when you need to spend time on strategy, on looking ahead, before it sounds too obvious, but too many entrepreneurs don't make that time on the regular basis. So these kinds of questions on the regular, ask yourself these questions, talk to others about how they've done it yourself with that scaling phase. Because in the end, if you're just blind and flying blind, probably delegation will be some sort of over.
Yes. We've got a comment here from Wayne. Delegation is limited by manpower and cash flow availability. 100%. It's really hard to hire somebody when you don't have the budget for it. However, the question I think that is great to ask or to look at in this situation is, how do I get more manpower? How do I get more for the cash that I have or create more cash? And that answer is almost always related to being able to define the delegation in a more efficient and more coordinated manner. So a lot of businesses oftentimes have people who do duplicate things, and then there are some other things missing, which creates a lot of chaos. So as an owner, entrepreneur, as a founder, you want to go in and take all of your job descriptions, whether you have 3 or whether you have 300, and try to make sure that it covers all the bases, but not twice.
Yep. And be resourceful. I would like to add as a last comment. Be resourceful. That's delegation.
Yes.
And manpower.
Yes. And
all right, David.
Since I only got through one of the things on my list, so I feel this topic is coming back up.
by the way. Thank you so much for today, David. And if you have any last questions, people that are still that, we'll be happy to answer them afterwards. And hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you to everybody, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Cheers.